point this up. We'll jump back to Tyre really quickly. So this is an aerial view of the city of Tyre. And this actually used to be an island. So Tyre was an island, which of course is wonderful, wonderful to fortify. As Alexander found out when he ended up conquering it around 330 BC. He actually ended up building a causeway connecting the island to the mainland, so that's why it looks the way it does today, with the accumulation of silt, actually that comes all the way up from the Nile. Now, right, this is a peninsula, but in antiquity it would have been an island. So it's very possible that these depictions of islands, both on the Balawat gates and in the reliefs, those sea reliefs of Sargon II at Khorsabad, might be relating to Phoenician islands, islands like Tyre. And of course, right, with these fortifications, it's quite possible. So we talked about Phoenician access to timber. We've talked about murex, right, for dyeing fabrics. Metalwork, we'll get to in a moment. But of course, ivories. There's an explosion of ivory carving that takes place from the 9th to the 7th centuries BCE. Right, we saw this early on at places like Megiddo in the late Bronze Age. This region's known for its ivory carving. But under the Phoenicians, this art form really takes a new height. And of course, we've seen Phoenician ivory carving show up in the reliefs of the Assyrians, and also right in the actual palaces themselves, like at Fort Shalmaneser. We talked a little bit before about some of the stylistic differences of these ivories, and I wanted to show you this comparison here. These styles are difficult to break down, especially following the internationalism of the late Bronze Age, but they are rather distinct. We find, in general, at least two distinct styles of ivory carving. One is this North Syrian style here, and then we have a Phoenician style right here on the right. And typically, the Phoenician ivories are much better proportioned with the Assyrian style, this Aramaean or Neo-Hittite style, being much heavier. You can see the use of background space. There's less free background space. The proportions are heavier, they're rounder forms, a bit more stylized, where our Phoenician ivories follow almost Egyptian proportions, and of course derive a lot of influence from Egypt. But I wanted to show you this slide just in the sense that, again, while executed differently and in different places, right, two very different workshops, probably coming from different parts of the Eastern Mediterranean, the iconography is the same. Right? We have almost the exact same depiction, probably a mythological scene of what looks like St. George and the Dragon, right, in the sense of right this spearing of a beast. But again, a great example of how the iconography can be the same, but the execution can be a bit different. The Phoenicians were also metal workers, as we can see in these Phoenician bronze bowls. A number of these bowls were actually found at Nimrud, and we can see here again that use of Egyptianizing iconography, right? These sphinxes wearing the crown actually of Upper and Lower Egypt, but again done in a very attenuated and thin, very stylized way. Also, Phoenician glass inlays with the same motifs were found at Nimrud. I think actually 4 or 5 of these bowls come from Nimrud, and we've seen these bowls again in the scenes of Ashurnasirpal II, right, where he's standing with his bow holding a ceremonial bowl. Well, here's your bowl. And we see these bowls not only in sort of the Eastern Mediterranean, right, but they're distributed along these Phoenician trade networks all the way to places like Italy, where again we see bowls that have the same iconography. And they're not just made of brass either. We find examples made out of silver, out of gold. Typically, they're these hammered designs and follow concentric circles in which we have processional scenes, right? A central image surrounded by images of chariotry, nature, and other mythological scenes. The distribution of ivories is also the same, not just in the Eastern Mediterranean, right, but as far as Spain. And again, right, by the 6th century, Carthage has actually been founded, and I'm sorry, by 814 is the founding of Carthage. But by the 6th century, the Phoenicians have established a very, very wide-ranging trade network. And perhaps the most famous thing that we know the Phoenicians for is their writing system, the use of the Phoenician alphabet. And the Phoenicians, again, are the first state-level society to really use a phonetic alphabet. And it's this alphabet, actually, that is the grandfather of our modern alphabet. The language, of course, is a Semitic language. It's a derivative of Akkadian, which is linked to Egyptian. It's similar to Akkadian, Arabic, and Semitic. But it was actually written, again, in this very new and an innovative way. The Phoenician alphabet is known as an abjad. So an abjad, or an abjad alphabet, which simplifies a number of these languages that we've seen before. So Akkadian, for example, has phonetic complements, but it has other signs as well. Egyptian has uniliteral, biliteral, triliteral signs, individual pictograms that can mean one sound, they can mean up to 3 sounds. Sometimes they can mean an entire word and they don't have a phonetic complement at all. So these are very complicated systems, Egyptian, Akkadian, to learn. In the late Bronze Age, we have examples of the development of an alphabet that really associates a single sound with a single letter. And this gets fully fleshed out by the time the Phoenicians sort of come to power, right? Same people, different name, and now with a writing system that's highly simplified. This abjad alphabet, which really means one sound for one consonant. You can learn it very, very easily. There are about 22 different letters, and vowels are added later on. The vowels are sort of unknown. Those of you who might be familiar with Arabic, you'll know the Arabic alphabet, for example, doesn't have any vowels written in it. It's all consonants. You have to sort of know the vowels, and there are other markings to indicate them. So similarly, Phoenician is an abjad, and it goes hand in hand with this trading network. And as a result of its ease of use, it actually ends up spreading and forming many of the alphabets that we have today. So we start with Phoenician, which actually goes down to Aramaic. And the Greeks adopt it. So we have the Aramaic alphabet, the Greek alphabet, Aramaic being a modification from Aramaic. We actually get Hebrew. The Hebrew alphabet. We also get the Arabic alphabet. From Greek, we have Latin, of course, right? By the time that it actually goes from the Phoenicians to the Greeks to the Carthaginians, and then finally to the Romans. So we have the Latin alphabet, and then Cyrillic, still in use, in Asia, and then, the Coptic alphabet, too. And by the time we get to these later alphabets, Latin alphabets, Coptic, and whatnot, vowels are actually added. But you can see, again, this system is incredibly important and is really the grandfather of our current writing system. In fact, the letters that are used, you can see here, they're very angular because these originally would have been written with a stylus, incised in clay or actually incised in wax. We have an example of an ivory writing board here. We've looked at this one before. This is from Nimrud and dates to from the 9th to the 7th centuries, and would have been filled with wax, so you could actually erase what you just wrote. So this is wonderful for keeping track of objects that are being traded when you move into a port. Maybe you intended to sell, 15 mina of silver, and you were only able to sell 10. Well, now you can change it. You just simply erase it in your wax writing board. And actually, we have some of these boards with inscriptions still in them. So again, the language is, or the contribution of this alphabet is really important. And actually, one of our first inscriptions, you can see again what the the Phoenician alphabet looks like. One of our earliest inscriptions actually comes from the sarcophagus of Ahiram itself. And it's actually a really interesting inscription for a number of reasons. This was excavated, again, at Byblos, and was found at the bottom of a very deep tomb shaft. And on the top of this wonderfully inscribed sarcophagus is an inscription. And the inscription, which is here, reads thus. It says, "A coffin which was made by Itobal, son of Ahiram, king of Byblos, for his father when he put him down into seclusion," so right, when he buried him. "Now, if a king among kings, or a governor among governors, or a commander of an army should come upon Byblos, destroy it, and disturb this coffin, then may that man be stripped of his powers. May the throne of his kingdom be overturned, and may peace and quiet flee from Byblos. And from him may his registration concerning the libation tube of his memorial sacrifices be canceled." So right, we remember at Ugarit we saw those tombs in which libations could be poured, and we actually saw it, with the Assyrians to a certain extent at Nimrud as well. You pour libations to the dead. In this case, this is a curse, right? Anybody comes and disturbs Byblos, disturbs the tomb of King Ahiram, may that kingdom be overturned, may Byblos fall into chaos, and may that man's libations in death, which will sustain him in the afterlife, be cut off. So this wonderful curse that comes from it. And again, one of our earliest, if not our earliest, Phoenician inscription in this important alphabetic script. There's actually one other inscription that's actually halfway down the tomb shaft, which is interesting. It was interpreted as a curse for a long time, but then later retranslated. And it actually says, "Concerning knowledge, humble yourself here and now in this dark basement." So again, probably linked to the ritual internment of Ahiram, but interesting in its own right. So that about does it for the Phoenicians. Any questions? I know we have to move through this material quickly because we're feeling the crunch. We only have 7 classes left. 7 or 6? 7, I think. 7 more. So any questions about the Phoenicians before we get back to the Assyrians next time? Okay. All right. Well, I will see you guys on Friday, and sorry for the technical difficulties.